In 2020, researchers got a lot closer to uncovering the roots of prejudice and racism by observing the behavior of one of our most common biological cousins, Rattus norvegicus, known better as the common brown rat. In a series of psychology experiments at the University of Chicago, researchers Inbal Bartle and Professor Peggy Mason studied whether rats would help other rats in distress. They placed one rat inside a small restrainer, and another that was free to move around. If the free rat opened the door, the trapped one escaped, and many did so. But here's where it gets a bit uncomfortable. Rats were far more likely to help rats that looked like themselves. Rats belonging to the same strain and often with the same fur color. Different looking rats were more often ignored. At first glance, it looks an awful lot like prejudice. It even looks a little bit like racism. But Bartle noticed something crucial. When rats were raised only with other rats that looked like them, they showed this bias. But when rats were raised in mixed groups, this bias completely disappeared. They helped everyone. Bartle's conclusion was blunt. Prosocial behavior in rats depends on who they're familiar with, not genetics. The rats weren't born biased, and they weren't choosing to purposefully be cruel to rats who didn't share their own characteristics. They were just choosing what felt safe and familiar. Psychologists call this the in-group bias. This is the tendency to favor people who feel like us, especially when exposure is limited, and humans do this constantly. Now more than ever, we are trusting what's familiar. We empathize more with people we recognize, and we hesitate with those that we don't. This doesn't mean that prejudice is inevitable. Instead, it means that bias as a whole and prejudice is learned through isolation and environment. The rats teach us something simple but powerful. Exposure to new cultures, languages, and people changes behavior. If rats can learn who to help based on who they grew up with, then prejudice doesn't begin with hate. It begins with distance. It exists as a learned pattern shaped by fear, separation, and unfamiliarity. But this research also shows that this behavior can be unlearned. Exposure changes who feels human to us. Connection widens your circle of empathy. Understanding is perhaps the most powerful tool in human experience. It's the reason why Daryl Davis was able to convince numerous Klansmen to leave the KKK. It's why soldiers laid down arms in the trenches during World War I for Christmas. And our complex experience of empathy makes us all uniquely human. Much ado about psychology. What should we overthink next?